Hello and welcome to the Wormhole podcast. With me today is Naomi Hamill, author of the stunning novel How to Be a Kosovan Bride, published by Salt Publishing. Links are in the description below. Welcome, Naomi.
Thank you. Thanks.
For the benefit of those who haven't read your book, I'm going to read the description on the back cover because it's a perfect summary. The Kosovan bride embraces centuries of culture to become the Kosovan wife, the path of her life predetermined by tradition. The returned girl, having failed a virginity test, faces a long road that could not be more different. The short history of one of the world's youngest countries is illustrated through the stories of the Kosovan wife and the returned girl, intertwined with threads of Albanian folktale and haunting, bitter memories of the war in the Balkans. The sinister undercurrent of Albanian blood feuds underpins a story about the horrors of armed conflict, the nature of tradition and hope for the future, as new life emerges from the darkness. So, Naomi, you've been to Kosovo quite a few years running. Could you expand on this for the background of the book?
Yeah, sure. So I started going to Kosovo, I think it was probably in about 2004. I had a friend who was a teacher and she had moved to Manchester and she'd got involved with this charity called Manchester Aid to Kosovo. And she basically had been out to Kosovo and the charity were trying to build a park because they'd been involved with some children who'd been evacuated to Manchester, and the charity was trying to build a park to sort of promote peace and to also recognise peace in their hometown in Kosovo. And so my friend got involved and she went out there, and my friend Anna, and then I think she found that there were lots of children who were really lovely and trying to get involved in helping with the park, but in some ways I think the children were sort of getting in the way, and she, being a teacher, just started sort of playing with them and doing games, and then she wanted to do something more structured with the children. So the next year she sort of organised like a summer school, and then she asked me, I think it was the next year, to go with her and to help her to sort of run this summer school. And it started pretty small, and then we just did it for quite a few years, and I've sort of been going ever since, really. And that's sort of how I got to know Kosovo, and and how my visits, I've been, I don't know how many times I've been, so many times, it feels, I've got lots of friends there now, and it feels like a place that I've just watched change and develop, and where I've heard lots of stories and things, and it became like a really important and special place to me. And I wasn't really thinking that I would write about it, but it's something that just sort of came up in bits and pieces of my writing, and then somehow became a book, really. So
You started with a short story about it, I think. Is that right? Or
that's
the milk?
Yeah, it wasn't actually that story that I started with, but so I'm a teacher, and I was teaching in London for a really long time, and then I was working in a school and it sadly closed down, and so I decided I'd like to do an MA in creative writing, because it's something I'd always loved, but hadn't perhaps had the time and space to think about writing something more developed. So I moved to Manchester and went to Manchester Met to do an MA in creative writing, and I mean, we were just encouraged to write things every week, and I seemed to start writing quite a few short stories about Kosovo. Actually, the first thing I ever wrote was the opening chapter to How to Be a Kosovan Bride. That was the first thing I wrote on the course, and but at that stage it was just something I wrote, and I didn't really, I was just experimenting with things, and I was just writing things that sort of came to mind. So I didn't really have any plan to turn it into anything that was longer or that was going to be published. And then I just basically, whenever I wrote something about Kosovo, everyone on the MA just became really interested in it, and that seemed to be the thing that I could write best about, and also the thing that seemed to interest people. So I then just wrote more and more. And then thought later on about how to possibly put it together into something longer. So yeah.
So what's the reaction? You've touched on it just then, but what has the reaction been like? Have you been able to take the book to Kosovo and share it with people there?
So I was really lucky actually a couple of years ago. So when just before the book was published, I worked with some amazing young women and the director of the National Library of Kosovo to sort of work on doing a sort of, a reading there, and it's a really beautiful building. I really love it. And so I did a reading there and talked about the book a bit. And I think probably a mixed reaction. I think lots of people that I know and who have read it have said, oh yeah, that feels real to me, and they've enjoyed reading the stories. And I think some of the young women who I've talked to have enjoyed reading about young women who are sort of changing and developing. I think when it was sort of first out, I think some people maybe didn't want me to write about Kosovo because I'm not from Kosovo. So I mean that's that's a difficult sort of question about whether you should do that or not, I suppose. I think there's a chapter in the book which is about someone coming, and it's someone told me they really cringed when they read that chapter because it's about someone coming from the UK and making loads of mistakes and not getting things right. And I think that's a bit of a nod to the fact that I probably have made mistakes and haven't got things quite right. But yeah.
Realistic, but I suppose yes, difficult to read when you've experienced that. Yes. So, what is Kosovo like today?
Extremely vibrant, constantly sort of changing. So I guess over the last sort of, I guess it's 16, 17 years, things have totally changed. So, I can remember when I first would go, you'd sort of walk down the road and be worried that you'd fall in a pothole, or you'd have to have a torch because there wasn't really much lighting, or you'd have constant power cuts and things. And things have totally changed and developed. And there's a lot for people to do and to see, and to lots of opportunities. But a lot of the young people still, I think, worry about not being able to get a job because I think there's still quite a lot of unemployment. So, and also like politically, I think there's been lots of elections recently. So I think things will change. I think there's the political party that I mentioned in the book. I believe they have just, won loads and loads of seats in the election. So I think, things are changing. I think the thing that really amazes me is lots of the young people who I've worked with, lots of them since they were, children, and they've grown up in the summer club that and their absolute passion and determination to learn and to get an education and to, make such a success of their lives is absolutely just fantastic. And I just think it's amazing, the level of dedication to learning and to changing with lots of the young people is great. I just feel like I always learn a lot from the young people that we work with. There's lots of volunteers, like I say, who have been in summer club or who've come and helped us. Come and helped us over the years. And I just think that's the thing that I always remember about Kosovo is all our volunteers and their passion and their sort of willingness to learn, really. So Yeah, I mean, the town that I visit regularly, it's quite bustling, and again, things change from year to year, and things have developed. There's lots more restaurants, places for people to go out. It used to be that when we would go out, I would mainly see older men in coffee shops, and mainly see men out, and especially in the evenings, you would hardly ever see any women. You'd always feel, you'd always feel that you were. It was funny being a woman out in the evenings, but things have changed. That's changed. I would say always changing. Yeah.
So, have you learned Albanian?
I can speak some Albanian. I wouldn't say I've learned it. So I can certainly, I can tell children what to do in summer club, and I can certainly, I can often listen to conversations and know what's going on, but I wouldn't say I've learned Albanian. I wish I had. I certainly would say I'm very familiar with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I wondered, because I was reading the book, you've got these phrases and the words, and it just struck me that maybe you had either learned it or picked some up along the way. So to move on to the book itself.
I mean, I did try it. Sorry, yeah, go on.
No, carry on. That's fine.
No, I was just going to say I did try it. It's actually really difficult to learn Albanian when you're in the UK, because it's not really a sort of language that people give lessons in. So I have had some friends who have taught me bits and pieces along the way, but it is actually quite hard to get lessons in Albanian, it has to be said, when you're in the UK. So I can imagine.
So you have these two women in your book, and they are two versions. They're two people, but in effect they're two versions of a young woman living in post-war Kosovo, who are introduced. They're almost like ambassadors of their culture, and they are both having a wedding. And slowly the vignettes that you've got are joined by more and more stories of life during the war. And I wondered what made you choose this mode of storytelling?
So lots of the stories that I first wrote, so like I say, I wrote the first chapter. That was the first thing I ever wrote, and then lots of the other things I wrote were sort of more the complete stories about the war, to be honest, so for the MA I needed to write something that was complete, and I really liked the short story form, but I wanted it to in some ways have some sort of structure. So I didn't just want to have different short stories just put together in a collection. I was really interested in I suppose in how you bring together short stories in a sort of novel. I don't know if we can call it a novel, sort of, but so then I decided that I needed to take some time, so I took about 6 or 7 weeks to bring together what I already had. So I had lots of different short stories and things, and wasn't really sure how to bring it together, and had various different ideas. And in the end, the idea of this, I'd been talking with a friend of mine, Faz, who he had kind of talked about what it might be like for some young women sort of more traditionally, and then I just started writing those stories, and then I started ordering the other stories and putting them into some what I felt was a good order, and then I used some translations by a man called Robert Elsey, who has translated loads of Albanian folk tales, and I found that really interesting anyway. So I was looking at those, and then sort of found the perfect story, and spoke to him about rewriting it. And so I don't know if that answers the question, but it was sort of experimentation really, and then just trying to find a structure and form that I could work with, because I didn't ever think I could write something that was just a sort of traditional novel. I was more writing these tiny little things, but I did want it to feel complete somehow. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, no, the concept of the fractured narrative comes to mind. I don't know if that's kind of the what you would call it. Yeah, no, it's.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know about fractured narrative, but.
So you've gone into the folklore, and I was wondering about that. The Maiden in the Box that you've written, it's your own creation, but it is inspired by research into Albanian folklore. Can you tell us more about this in regards to other folklore? You know, where does it fit in, and what's the mythology like of folklore itself?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm an expert at all. What I did was, there's this website called albanianliterature.net, which basically holds, I mean, I'd recommend it if people want to have a look. It holds loads and loads of translations by there's this man called Robert Elsey, who I think he just sadly passed away just a year or so ago, and he has basically taken lots of traditional folk tales, and he was obviously spoke Albanian and translated them. So I couldn't tell you where it fits in, to be honest, but I just read, I was just reading them, and I just found The Maiden in the Box, and I just thought, actually, this has got, lots of significance for what I'm writing, and it felt like something that fitted and had some messages that I could sort of relate to with what I was writing. So that's really why I chose it. And obviously I sort of rewrote it and expanded on it, but used the basis of the tale.
So yes, fictionalized fiction then, I suppose. Fictionalized folklore.
Yeah. Yes.
Shall we have a reading? You've picked out a section.
Yeah, sure. So I'm just going to read you something from close to the end, which is it's one of the girls. It's the girl who's gone on to university, and she's living in the capital city, Pristina, and she's got a boyfriend, and she's worried about what her family will think. But she has this visit from her brother, and anyway, I'll just read it to you. You're driving into the city, and you don't care about the reckless drivers tonight. You're probably more reckless than they are, you think. You're sure you are. It's dark, and the lights from the bigger trucks shine right into your face. You nearly go into a wood truck that's travelling too slow. You beep your horn. Again, you beep your horn. You reach the edge of the city, and the traffic is queued up. Just your luck. You need to get to her as soon as you can and whisk her back to the village immediately. And your aunt's apartment is at least 6 streets away, and the traffic is going nowhere. You breathe for the first time in hours. You curse the traffic. You do not know how so many people can have so many cars. You shout to God out loud in your car, and you ask him why something cannot go right for you today. You wish that God would cause a giant wind to blow these cars away, so you could just get to her. You're completely still. Nothing's moving, and so you stare into the streets. You see the women buying shoes and a small boy carrying a large melon, so large it nearly pulls him over. And there are women with headscarves carrying eggs, and then the smarter ones from the centre of the city walking home to apartments, and younger university students thronging back to their homes, some to get on buses back to villages and towns. And then you spot her. God has listened to you tonight, and you say a small prayer to thank him for his answer, and you get out of the car and call her over. And she's with a boy, a man, and you don't even care tonight. Let her be with any boy tonight, you think. You do not care. It does not matter. She looks embarrassed, frightened. It must be her boyfriend, but you don't care. You just tell her to get into the car straight away, and so she comes, obedient, and she gets in, asks you why you're here, and she looks very scared, like you've found out about the boy and you've come to take her away. And you say, no, don't worry, I can see he is your boyfriend, but that is not why I'm here. And she looks relieved, but you don't want that because what you have to say will hurt. She is very ill and they don't know if she'll last the night. Maybe a few days at the most. She wants to see you. She asks, why didn't anybody know? And you tell her that you just didn't know. You've asked the same question yourself, and you're getting married in a month and you wanted her there. You can't imagine what it would be like without her. But anyway, your mother wants to see her, and you must get her back as soon as you can. You drive her straight to the local hospital where your mother is. Your mother looks like she's made of wax, and your sister begins to cry, and your mother begins to cry, and your father, he cannot speak.
That's a really good. I'm glad you picked that bit actually, because I was thinking of how we bring in the poetry of your writing, and it's a very good example of it. And you've actually got what I was going to move on to in that section, which was I wanted to say you've got a lot of the narrative in the third person, and you've got some of it where it's kind of there's a distance to it that provides a look at people in general, and then there's some of it that it's very intimate. But then you've got this second person perspective that almost seems to break the fourth wall with the references to you, this you, and I find this interesting because for so many people the second person divides opinion, but you've got this idea where you can tell who you is each time, and sometimes it feels like it's you, the reader. And I wondered what it was that made you use the second person.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I don't know. I think lots of things that I did were very sort of instinctual, but I think because the characters there's not really, the sort of are characters, but the sort of aren't characters, and people aren't really named very much. And I think what the different sort of persons allow me to do is to show character, but in a different way. And also I think I sort of wanted that second person, because it's her brother, and yeah, I sort of wanted the second person to be it's sort of like an intimate, like you say, an intimate character, but also maybe a character she feels slightly scared of in a way. I don't know if scared of is the right word, but there's certainly a worry about what he thinks. So maybe that's what I think it's. Yeah, I mean, I think in a way it's. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of distancing going on in what I'm doing, but with the second person, yeah, I think it was just in some ways just to show a different character, but also it sort of creates a sense of mystery about that character, and yeah, I think it displaces the reader as well. I think probably my feeling is that with the book you have to you don't always know where you are with it, and you're not sure sometimes who you're with and who exactly people are. And I think that's, like I say, lots of it was kind of just instinct really in terms of writing, and what I've, like you say, it's got lots of poetry and rhythm, and I think a lot of the way that I work is probably writing and then saying out loud things, and it's like, how does it feel to me? Does that have a sense of poetry, and does it does it sound almost like I want it to feel in a strange kind of way? So I think part of that was it felt right for that character, and it felt right for certain parts to move to the second person. So yeah, that's what I did, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it is interesting, because I found particularly when I was rereading it, just a few days ago, that before I really got, as it were, who the you was, I found it pulled me in, and it was like it was pulling me in to make me really think about this war, and how, back in the UK, we're far away from it. We are literally distanced from it, and all these horrors are going on. So yeah, no, that was interesting. And then yes, it comes out and you work out who it is, but because you still had that feeling, it's powerful. Is what I suppose what I want to say.
Yeah, I wonder as well, it might have something to do with it not being. Yeah, and yes, maybe I wonder if it has something to do with me being at a distance from it as well. Maybe it's got a sense of that. I don't know, but yeah, it might have something to do with that. I think that's a really interesting point. Yeah.
But yeah, it's just it just brings you more into it, I think, and it just makes it all the more powerful. Whether intentional, whether it's something you intentionally did or not, it certainly felt that was a part of it to me, which is wonderful. I think the way it carries you along. So, How to Be a Kosovan Bride was published in 2017. Have you got another book in the works?
Yes, I've got something else that I'm working on. So you mentioned poetry before, and I think I always wanted to be a poet, but I don't think I'm actually very good as a poet. Whenever I write any poetry, I always think it's terrible. So
I'm surprised, because especially hearing you read that, it sounded very poetic. You could possibly, put it on different lines and it would work.
Yeah, I think maybe it. I bring the bits that I can do of poetry into the prose, but yeah, I don't think I am a very good poet, but I really love poetry. I think I've always really loved poetry, and so I'm writing about a Victorian poet, actually. So I'm probably not even halfway through a novel. I'm probably about 25,000, 30,000 words into a novel about a Victorian poet and her life. And it's obviously totally different in terms of subject matter, but it's probably got, in some ways, a similar feel in terms of the style of writing, I would say, and also in terms of the style of writing lots of very short little things and then thinking about how they're going to fit together later, probably. So, yeah, if that makes sense. But
yeah, no, it does. Yes. Is the poet someone historical, or are they fiction?
So it's a historical poet, but it's again sort of taking sort of things that happened and things that didn't happen and fictionalizing them, if that makes any sense. So just taking little snippets and then using my imagination, really. So yeah, that's sort of what I'm doing. So yeah,
that sounds very interesting. Yeah, please finish it. We want to read it.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done any of it for quite a while, so I need to get back on. So yeah.
Naomi, it's been lovely having you here today and hearing about How to Be a Kosovan Bride and your new book that is in the works. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me, Charlie. It's been a pleasure.
Join me on Monday the 9th of December when I will be talking to Philip Lewis, author of The Barrowfields. The Wormhole Podcast Episode 3 was recorded on the 18th of October and published the 25th of November 2019. Music and production by Charlie Place.